Good day. I'm Brian Wickman, Outreach Coordinator for the National Institute for Direct Instruction. I'm joined today with Nazam Hussain, an educational psychologist with the Bradford schools in the United Kingdom. So Nazam, thank you for coming and joining me today and talking a little bit about NIFDI support and your journey through with direct instruction. So to start with, can you just tell us a little bit about your setting, where you are, who you are, what you're doing?
Yeah, so as you said, my name is Nazam Hussain. I'm an educational psychologist, and I work in one of the local districts in the north of England in a city called Bradford. Now, the educational psychologist in England would have a similar role, if I'm right, to your school psychologists in the States, whereas I think your name for educational psychologists in the States tends to be more professionals who are more research-based, whereas our job as educational psychologists is to work directly as applied psychologists with a patch of schools. And I have a group of schools alongside other colleagues who are educational psychologists, and we support along a range of individual, group, and systemic level support to schools.
I see. Yep. Okay. So can you tell us what led you to direct instruction and specifically to NIFDI?
Yeah, so interesting story, actually. So about 2 or 3 years ago, we have something in the UK called the Education Endowment Foundation, which is a bit like What Works Clearinghouse in the US. And they were calling for papers or calling for expressions of interest for research on raising the attainment of those students who are categorized as having special educational needs. I saw this call for a research or expressions of interest, and I was familiar with Project Follow Through and direct instruction prior to that as part of my educational psychology training. And I wanted to do a joint bid, which I did. I contacted yourself and Kurt, and we did a joint bid to not necessarily target those kids with special education needs, but think about how to promote universal practices for children in reception age, which in England is 4 or 5 year olds, which would actually mitigate against special educational needs alongside learning from developing in the first place. So really thinking about what environmental determinants do you get that exacerbate special education needs and move away from this thinking that special educational needs exists within an individual. Needless to say, when we made that bid, I think the Education Endowment Foundation was a little bit confused about why we chose a method that was more universal and whole cohort rather than target a specific population or a specific subgroup with special education needs. And we weren't successful with that bid. But further to that, I think after that, there were some further conversations around recruiting some local schools that I had a good relationship with and trying to implement with NIFDI their language and the reading mastery program for whole cohorts. So that's what we did, and managed to recruit 2 schools in inner city Bradford with high levels of social deprivation, minority groups, and also those students who have English as an additional language and actually overall tend not to have the language skills. So we managed to do that. So luckily, those 2 schools came on board and managed to deliver some training through NIFDI, sourcing some funding through the Engelman Foundation, which again, I'd like to thank you for.
Oh, certainly. So what it sounds like really is what your perspective, and wisely, is more of an inoculation. If you were to use a medical kind of treatment, it's an inoculation as opposed to a treatment once somebody already needs this.
And it seems to be, yeah, exactly. And it seems to be such an ethical way to do that. It seems to be such a, and it's getting people to think that actually your program delivery, your sequence of examples, what you teach and when you teach it, and in which order you teach things can help the students really understand the concept that they're trying to learn, which then inoculates them, as you say, from developing misconceptions or then having to mislearn something at a later stage which actually just creates more interference if it's not taught properly. And actually getting rid of that interference in your mind and those misconceptions leads to special educational needs, because then someone has to do something additional to and different from to mitigate against some issues which would have been developed 2 or 3 years previously, which everyone's forgotten about. So actually, the very system that proposes to cater for your special education needs may be the very system that creates in the first place.
What can you tell me a little bit about what the effect of NIFDI support, or what form did NIFDI support take, and what was the effect of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So once the 2 primary schools were on board and they wanted to deliver a whole school approach, a whole cohort approach in reception in the 4 and 5-year-olds for the language and the reading mastery, the support was actually exemplary. If you look at something, we have when you look at research and professional development, the impact on actual classroom practice is minimal. And the reason for that is because you have these one-off presentations and then people are just left to get on with it. It's actually the polar opposite of what NIFDI do. NIFDI provided training, which I think was really robust. I think it was spaced out with up to 4 days worth of training, I think it was. 2 days for each program, and then there was 2 days for general routines and behavior. And then there was ongoing supervision, ongoing practice support, so getting people to try out the skills. It was really structured in sequence, a bit like the direct instruction programs, actually. It was structured in sequence in such a way where people didn't feel overwhelmed by the teaching, but there were rigorous monitoring around what was going on. But it was actually walking through people through all the stages of the program, whether it be the placement tests, whether it be the strategies around error correction, whether it be the scripting, and then whether it be the data analysis, and then the scheduling. I remember Kurt when he did the training Kurt when he did the training at
the president of NIFDI, right?
Yeah, president of NIFDI. When he did the training when I was over at Eugene, he said, if you expect something, then inspect it. And I always remember that. And when Chris did the training, the implementation manager did the training in the schools, the thoroughness and robustness was amazing to see. I always kind of found it really rigorous, professional, but really sensitive at the same time. And I really like those kind of combinations. So really met people where they were, had high expectations, but didn't do it in such a way where people feel overwhelmed at the same time. I thought that was fantastic.
Excellent, excellent. So, I mean, we're still doing some work with your schools, I believe.
Yeah, so I think I was more involved initially, and the way we work is where the school have made up their own links, which we want really. They've made up their own links with NIFDI. So I did the starting bit initially, but now I think the schools liaise directly with NIFDI a lot more. And schools are doing that because they like it, because they see the results.
Great. And so can you make any comment on the changes that you may have noted in the instructional practices of those instructors?
Yeah, so at the time when, it was having teaching in this way for kids in reception who are 4 or 5-year-olds for specific times of the day was a bit of a culture change for some of those practitioners. But what they found was, especially with the language program and then subsequently with the reading program, that the children were making accelerated progress in terms of saying the whole thing. There was a big notion in the language program about learning the categories of various things, but then making sure that children are actually explicitly taught to say the whole thing, the whole sentence. And there was definitely progress within the lesson, which was easy to measure because the program kind of sets out to do that. But anecdotally, there was also talk from the head teacher and the teachers there that they heard more language whilst in their unstructured play, which was really refreshing to see. So it's capturing those transfer effects or those generalizability, because that's what we want ultimately. The explicit teaching has to lead on to some independent decision-making and independent skills in areas away from the program.
Exactly, yeah. Building that foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are there any parting words that you'd like to give us? Any perspectives?
Yeah, I think whenever I've contacted NIFDI, they've always been really open to ideas. They've been generous with their time. They've been really explicit and clear about what they provide and what they really want schools to do. And I've found that once you do commit, like these schools have done, the training that they provide and the support that they provide are second to none.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. I wish you great success, continued success, and would encourage you to continue on with what you're doing. We value the partnerships that we have, and particularly with our friends across the Atlantic in the UK. And so I wish you a good day and great success. So thank you for your time, Nazam.
No problem. Thank you.